record over. You ain't heard nothing.
From the news center outside the city of Chicago in the great Midwest, it's the Stranger Than Fiction news right here on The Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt. Here's our headlines. Cape Cod boaters have an unforgettable brush with a great white shark. People in Cape Cod, Massachusetts got the surprise of their lives last Monday after a pair of shark sightings. The first one, which took place off the coast of Provincetown, was spotted by boaters and featured a great white that measured about 17 feet long. The creature even managed to bump the boat. In Barnstable, passengers on a cruise boat also saw a shark in the water. Several beaches in Cape Cod were closed last Monday due to reports of shark sightings. More than 180 sharks had been spotted in the area this summer, and that number may go up. Source, Microsoft News. And an extinct prehistoric bird has been spotted and reported in Arizona. A 38-year-old woman in Marcopia County says she saw a bird believed to have become extinct 3 million years ago. The eyewitness is an avid bird watcher who provided a full name and location information but did ask to remain anonymous. She told Cryptozoology News a week ago Saturday that she was driving home when she spotted the purported bird on Friday at around noon. Quote, I was driving north on a 6-lane road. I was coming from the grocery store, she said. I saw an extremely large bird flying very low. It was on the same side of the road but going in the opposite direction of traffic, heading south. The wingspan took up 3 lanes of traffic. The woman described the bird as having a wingspan of over 20 feet. The bird was brownish-gray color, and it was light-colored. I am a bird lover and often go into nature with my binoculars to explore birds. And I know what cranes and eagles and hawks look like. This resembled a crane, but with a longer neck. But the wings were massive. It was flying so low I was concerned it could fly into a car, but it just kept soaring, she explained. She added that she didn't have enough time to grab her phone to take pictures, and that she couldn't have just stopped in the middle of the lane. In retrospect, though, I wish I would have done a U-turn and followed it. I regret not thinking of that at the time. The Arizona resident said that the bird definitely looked out of place, and that after looking it up online, it looked very much like a Palagornis sandersea. It looked and felt like it was prehistoric. When I found the illustration of that bird, it looked almost exactly like it. Source, CryptozoologyNews.com. And time for another Stranger Than Fiction Fringe Fun Fact. In the 16th and 17th century Europe, cannibalism was actually a fairly common practice, and it was all for medical purposes. The practice seems to have started because Egyptian mummies were thought to have magical curative properties, so they were ground up and put into many remedies. This has been the Stranger Than Fiction news on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS speed rescue.
Contact, nice, you're in orbit. The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
And Forest Tower Studios is located on a hill in a shack in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Root. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on this Tuesday, August the 20th on into the 21st. We're going to be discussing conscious manifestation, sacred geometry, resonance, all of the stuff involved, vibration. This is a deep subject. This is more than sacred geometry. This is something called Cosmometry, and we're going to be speaking with our guest tonight, Marshal Lefferts. This is definitely in the sci-fi category, but I will tell you that it does play on right on top of our show last night when it comes to hermetics and ancient knowledge. This stuff also goes way, way back. And I think most of you are very familiar with sacred geometry and Nassim Haramein, and some of you have even brought up this subject called biogeometry that I've looked into as well. And so there's something to this fundamental thing. It's very hard to explain, but I see it in mysticism. I see it in even in the occult and magic and history, ancient Egypt and Sumer and Göbekli Tepe. It's everywhere, and it's also in the fundamental. It's almost like it's the software behind everything, and there's no better person to talk to about this than our guest tonight. He's one of the best on the subject, and the website for reference tonight is cosmometry.net. And speaking of sci-fi type stuff, actually one of our hosts, Suzanne Ross, is doing an event called Transcendence in Sedona, Arizona. And this is going to be a really cool event. If you want to have a transcendental experience, or you never have had that type of experience, and you want to also check out Sedona, go out there, go to sci-spy.tv/events and put in the code word LTV. That's going to get you $25 off the event, and it'll be a blast. Just remember that code word so you can get a discount if you're in the area. I don't know if they're doing anything online or not, but I will find out. And also, this show is brought to you by GetTheTea.com, AncientLifeOil.com, and PrepareWithAFriends.com. If you go get the tea to protect yourself or cleanse your body, or if you go get the CBD oil, or if you prepare yourself at PrepareWithAFriends.com, tell them we said, hey, over there. If you support our sponsors, you'll always be supporting the network too, so that's a good thing. There's also a donate button on the website if you want to support this show, and head on over to UFOseekers.com, which is backed and supported by the Fringe FM and Lighting the Void. If you've had a sighting you cannot explain, dial 661-UFO-7889 and go check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/UFO Seekers, UFOseekers.com as well on the web, and at UFO Seekers on Twitter. I did get to speak with Tim this weekend, and he's still getting ready to go out too. So it just took a while for them to get the UFO Seeker mobile up, and they'll be back out putting videos out. I used to stay up late at night and just turn the videos on and just play them. You know, there's something about the way he does that and storytelling that we all want back. And so I can't wait till that gets going again. I do want to mention something too about last night's show. You know, last night's show was a very, very important and a very deep subject to me, and I think some of you might realize now why I don't do a lot of show on hermetics, so to speak. I've had Jason Augustus Newcomb on here and a couple other people, and we've talked about it, and I don't do a lot of shows on it because it's a very deep subject. And here at Lighting the Void, it's all about asking the right question, because we are looking for the fundamental truths of the universe, not subjective truth, not what, you know, what's your truth and my truth is different. I'm talking about what makes up this thing called consciousness, who we are, and all of that. And I feel that Hermeticism is important, and you see why now, because it forces you in a way to face who you are now before your energetic body does its thing. And some people don't like that. they don't want to face it. They don't want to talk about it, or they already feel like they've got it all figured out, and that's fine. But you know what? The people that really liked last night's show, I got to tell you, they really, really liked last night's show. I mean, I've got some very extensive emails about it last night. So although it may not have been as fun, right, it was important. And I think that was something that we needed to do. So speaking of which, we're going to stay on this subject of ancient technology, ancient truths, and the cosmos with our guest tonight, Marshal Lefferts. And now Marshal Lefferts is on the board of directors of the Resonance Science Foundation, as well as co-author and core faculty of the Resonance Academy Delegate program. He's a lifelong explorer of cosmic geometry, music, unified physics, and the fractal-holographic nature of the cosmos. And for 41 years, he studied and synthesized a variety of pioneering research, including the work of Buckminster Fuller, David Bohm, Nassim Haramein, Foster Gamble, Richard Merrick, and others, culminating in his groundbreaking book, Cosmometry, which explores the holofractal nature of the cosmos. That came out in June, I believe, of this year. Now, he is the founder and director of the Cosmometry Project and associate producer of the documentary film Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take?, and co-director of visual effects and post-production supervisor for Thrive 2. This is What It Takes, which is currently in production at www.thriveon.com. It's also the former co-director of the Foundation for Conscious Evolution and consulting producer for the Buckminster Fuller Institute, both 1994 and 2004, and a producer of media projects for over 26 years. He's also a lifetime member of and regular presenter at COSM, which is the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. And that website is COSM, which is COSM.org. But the main website for tonight's reference, but I'm going to put all those links in there, is cosmometry.net or cosmometry.com. Thank you so much for coming on this show, Marshal. This is going to be a deep subject, and like I told you before we started, I got an analytical mind, and I can't wait to get into this, man. Thank you.
Excellent, Joe. Thank you so much. I really am glad to be here and dive into this good, deep stuff with you tonight.
So here's the thing. I told you before the broadcast, like, I come from a more of a Western occult type background. That's what got me into this. And in the back of, I think it was one of Israel Gardy's Systems book, he starts showing enneagrams, right? And it kind of starts with them. It starts with pentagrams, hexagrams, yada, yada, yada. Then it goes up and it gets into geometry and polygons. And I'm like, well, hey, I've seen this before. And no matter where I search when it comes to ancient knowledge, we see this, right? I mean, this to me is a fundamental truth. Even with things like crop circles, we had a guest on talking about that, where he would see these sacred geometric principles in crop circles. So before I assume I know what cosmometry is, I'm just assuming that sacred geometry is a part of it. Can you explain what that is for me?
Sure. Yeah, that definitely. So cosmometry is a word that I actually was seeking a name for this field that is commonly called sacred geometry. Back probably 13, 14 years ago, I was my background originates back in the late 70s and coming upon Buckminster Fuller's work, and Fuller went very deep into what he called nature's coordinate system, and his book's called Synergetics, which are just phenomenally deep, challenging technical explorations. It's actually called Explorations in the Geometry of Thinking. That's the subtitle. And so Bucky's work is very foundational to what I call cosmometry. And so being associated with that, being associated with Nassim Haramein and the physics community, and just the general kind of expanse into the disciplines of science in general, I was feeling like, there's probably another name that goes along with sacred geometry that might be more compatible to the scientific community than sacred geometry, which they're not going to likely call what they do sacred geometry. It's a good term for a more popular understanding. So I was just seeking a word, and I thought I made it up one night because I was thinking, well, it's cosmic, in its nature. It's not just geo, which is based on Earth, measuring the Earth geometry. It's cosmic, so I came up with cosmometry and thought I made it up, but it turns out it's been in the English language for probably 300 or so years, but it's really not in use. And so its traditional meaning is the art of measuring the world or universe. And, I think that's a good definition, but to me, there's just a very rich, broad understanding. And so I sort of extended into a definition that includes the study of the fundamental patterns and structures and processes and principles that underlie the manifestation of the universe at all scales. And that's, very commonly what the field of sacred geometry is pointing towards. And I feel like, there's a really great context for what sacred geometry is. And then there's a more broad field of understanding that includes Buckminster Fuller and David Bohm and Nassim and many others in this more kind of broad scientific context. And so for me, that's what cosmometry means.
So I guess, all right, thank you. I guess what you're saying is this is bigger than just sacred geometry. This is the fundamental building blocks of the universe, consciousness, pretty much everything, right?
That's the way I view it, in the sense that it's taking a more broad view, inclusive of areas that are not typically included in sacred geometry writings and things.
So how do we, when you look at something like the double slit experiment, right? And I'm sure you're very familiar with that. I've always wondered how sacred geometry and these fundamental things relate to that. And I don't even know if they do relate, because the way these guys talk about it is everything's photons, and it all actually, from my understanding, it all actually forms reality when it's observed. Okay, well, I get that, but it seems like there has to be some type of underlying software or structure to this whole thing. People that have shamanic and DMT experiences constantly talk about this, how they can see the architecture, or what they'll call the structure of everything.
Right.
Do you feel like when they see these shapes, when they see these things, that they are seeing consciousness, or they're seeing through a filter, perhaps? What's your view on that?
In a psychedelic journey?
Right.
When they're seeing, yeah. So I do. I mean, I've had those myself. As a matter of fact, when I was 19, when I had what I call a spontaneous, like frying pan over the head awakening experience. That was 41 years ago. And shortly after that, I came upon Buckminster Fuller's work. So he really grounded me in, and this is before I'd even heard the word sacred geometry, long before that. And so he grounded me in a very practical kind of approach to this field of knowledge. And then when I was 21, I did a vision quest up in the Adirondack Mountains, north of where you are there. And in a place that was way, way deep out in the wilderness. And I had some psilocybin mushrooms. And so I did this journey. And in the peak of that journey, I was really kind of granted this inner vision of what I call a double spiral pattern. When you get a chance to look at my book, and it's actually on the website as well, on the .NET website, there's a whole section on it called the field pattern. And it's the same pattern you see in sunflowers and cactus and lots of plants. But I saw that in my inner vision, and I said, okay, that is what I came for, and that's what I'm going to track now in nature and in the universe, and see how it shows up. And it's actually quite phenomenal how present that pattern is. And so, yeah, I believe when we kind of remove the filters of our perception through those kinds of means, other kinds of means, just in meditation or, breath work can do it as well, where we can kind of remove the everyday perceptual filters, we actually are seeing into, and this is where we could go, we could go a lot of directions, but we're actually seeing into the field of consciousness itself is really what I believe. And in that field, because I believe everything is consciousness. And so when we expand into that, we actually are perceiving the structure, the geometry, the patterns that are in the spatial field, but they're not visible typically because our perceptual framework is really oriented towards the 3D reality. And so when we get those chances to remove those filters and put on different glasses, you could say, yeah, I believe we're actually seeing what is actually there fundamentally. And some of it is really clearly getting understood through the cosmometry, the unified physics, how it relates to music, geometry, the polygons, all of that.
Right. Do you think that this is kind of like, well, I was trying to explain it earlier. In computers, we have like binary codes. It's like a simple form of codes behind what we see. What do you think is more important in your opinion? Okay. Because I've heard people say, well, number is more important than anything in the universe, right? This was Pythagoras, you know.
Right.
And believe that these geometrical shapes are based on the powers of number, right? But then I've heard it the other way around, that it's actually the sacred geometry. Yeah. Do you have a polar opinion on that, or do you think it's both, or what?
No, I don't have a polar opinion. The thing is, it's all talking about the same thing. There's actually only one thing going on in the universe. And this is a really kind of important, I feel like, a perceptual shift to make when looking at all the different ways you can look at this one thing. When you start to just realize they're all pointing to the same thing. There's actually only one whole dynamic that's at play. Then it doesn't matter which way you go into it. Numbers, geometry, all the different light, possible ways.
Sound,
light, sound, music, sacred geometry in the different contexts, Buckminster Fuller's synergetics. They're all actually looking at the same thing. And so when you start to view it from that perspective, when you start to see the unity of it and the wholeness of it, then it actually starts to make sense. Instead of seeming like, well, that one's that and that one's that, and how do they relate? You can start to see that there's a wholeness there, which is actually a fundamental kind of principle that I start my book with. The whole first section is called Wholeness, because it's from that perspective that we can start to see the simplicity that is otherwise looks pretty complex when you look at all these different pathways separately.
Right. It's one thing to learn this stuff, which I love learning it. It's really cool. It's one of the coolest things to learn, because it's kind of like everything starts coming together. You start seeing it in everything, right? It's in everything.
Exactly. That's because there's only one thing going on. So you're going to see it in everything.
But how do we use this practically? Is there a way that we can use this to enhance our lives while we're here?
Yeah, well, it's a really great question. It's a very vital question at this time on our planet, as you are well aware, because we're really at the critical edge of collapse of many systems. And we're kind of like in this strange sort of who gets to run the fastest to the finish line with whatever innovation that could or could not be beneficial to humanity and the planet. It's like
terraforming, like artificial intelligence. All that stuff.
It's like a crazed free-for-all, run as fast as you can. Now, what's missing from that, and I also read about this a lot in my book, is the context for why this is so important to understand, is because when we understand how the rest of the universe, let's just say that way, nature and the cosmos is already working very harmoniously and very well. It's thriving basically everywhere. When you kind of step back and look at it from that perspective, it's working very harmoniously and in a very integrated, holistic manner. And then we're not doing that. And so the importance of this and the practical application of it is by understanding these fundamental patterns and structures and processes and how nature creates healthy living systems and how the toroidal dynamic is fundamental to that in a evolving process perspective, what the geometry of the 0-point field is, which then informs us about the source of things like gravity and mass. And when you understand the source of gravity, for example, like Nassim Haramein is really showing us through his physics, then we have the ability to to interact with it in a way that has gravity control. That's just one example of a technology. Or accessing energy from the so-called vacuum of space, the emptiness of space, which is actually full of energy. So those are kind of technological applications, but more broadly, it's essential that we harmonize ourselves, this human experience that we are fully on in here and at the critical edge of kind of screwing up, maybe even to our fatal end if we're not really careful. But imagine now taking all the innovation and all the amazing knowledge and the brilliance of technological development and combining it with understanding what harmonizes us with nature and what is detrimental. For instance, there are frequencies that are becoming more and more understood that are beneficial to biology, and frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies, et cetera, that are detrimental to biology.
Right.
So instead of just creating a technology without thinking about that, we create technologies that are actually choosing to use those beneficial frequencies and not use the detrimental ones. And there's quite a lot of study in that area that I think is just essential to making the shift. And basically, overall, it's necessary to harmonize our technological and social and relationship with nature and with the rest of the universe.
Man, I do too, and a lot of people believe that.
Yeah,
a lot of people understand that's what needs to happen. That there needs to be some type of energetic synchronization to restore nature using these fundamental truths. But we're at the mercy of the war machine and the beast. It seems like when I say the beast, I mean, I guess you could just call it, like you talked about, greed on a mass technological level, trying to be first technologically. How do you think that we could use these things to influence those types of people? Maybe.
Well, influencing people is probably the hardest part of the equation here.
I mean, how do we influence? Like, if you take, I don't know, any big oil company or any big company like that's trying to create an AI machine like Google and so forth. And even you got super smart people out there like Jaron Lanier who goes and debates these people constantly. He's like, look, we're not ready as a society to be doing this yet. We still don't get along with each other. How do we influence these people to look at this? Is it even possible?
Well, it all depends on the receptivity of any individual you're talking with and bringing this information to. Now, I do believe a couple things, that there are more and more people who are getting the fact that there's a values aspect of what is happening that needs to be put in place. Like Jaron Lanier, he's like, you guys, you got to really think about the ethics and the values along with running to the finish line, because that's what we needed to balance it out and not screw up. And I think there are more and more people that are like that. Now, in the big corporations, those are, like you said, they're really big machines, and they're very challenging to change the course of where, because there's so much like momentum in the direction they're going.
Yeah,
and
they're running the world.
It's huge, and they're running the world, and they're dictating the agenda. They're dictating the agenda in education and medicine and government and economics. And, that's a huge challenge. Now, another perspective of how to make the shift is what Bucky Fuller always said. He said, in order to change a system in society, you don't try to fight the old system. You make a new system that obsoletes the old one. And that's what we're on the verge of doing, because when you understand that the whole universe is based on frequency and resonance and vibration, and that means all the biological systems, the nature of the source of energy, agricultural interactions. When you start to look at it from that perspective, there are many new technologies that are being innovated now that are based on a much pure, simpler frequency resonance-based science and theory that are just as effective, for instance, in medicine, because basically pharmaceuticals are chemicals, and chemicals are all vibrations. They're all frequencies and vibrations.
Right.
That's all atoms and molecules are.
That's why you go into withdrawals when you stop taking them, and your body vibrations out of whack.
So we're learning now that we can kind of go more toward the source, the pure source of vibration and resonance, whether it's in like medicine or generating energy, or providing solutions in agriculture that don't require chemicals and pesticides and things like that.
Sure.
These things are really now actually, they're here and about to pop out more in the world. And that's what's going to make the shift. And that's what people are going to choose, because they're going to see that it's better for us. It's actually, it's better for everything. And everybody will actually feel better. And when we feel better, that's what we're going to choose. And yeah, there's going to be some resistance. There's a transition that has to be gone through, and it may not be easy. It may not be pretty.
I get what you're saying. It'll be like birthing pain. We're already kind of going through birthing pains, but we're definitely. I definitely feel like we're coming up to a precipice where we need to start making some major decisions. And look, we got to take a break here, but I want you guys to go to this website if you can. If you're listening on your PC or even phone, cosmometry.net. We're going to look at some of this Cosmometry 101, as well as discuss some specific examples of what's going on in our society and how we could actually make it better using these fundamental principles. We'll be right back with Marshal Lefferts.
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Roop, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is Kronox from Belgium, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from GetTheT.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at GetTheT.com and see what all the fuss is about. Again, that's GetTheT.com.
So, have you heard of heavy metals? I'm not talking about the heavy metals in the junkyard. I'm talking about the heavy metals that build up in your body. Heavy metals in your body can make you feel sluggish, fatigued, and just plain off. Why not try Life Change Tea at GetTheT.com? Cleansing your body and making you feel great. No, not cleansing the outside of your body, but cleansing the inside of your body of intruders that sneak their way into you and set up an intruder camp. Life Change Tea helps remove unwanted intruder camps. Brew it, steep it, and drink in the results. Tastes great, so you can create a new health habit. Our tea loves to help people. It just needs the chance. So order yours today by logging on to GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. Our Life Change Super Strength Tea is waiting. This could be a beautiful relationship. Take charge of your health. Order at GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com.
Alex X. Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, The Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm, call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, me old China plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Light in the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your northern self and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussel, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you beat a Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to the Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on the Fringe FM.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
You're listening to Lighting the Void. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. If you would like to text, you can text in at 501-777-5631.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight we're with our guest, Marshal Lefferts, and we're talking about cosmometry. The website you can actually go to is cosmometry.com, COSMOMETRY, cosmometry.com. There's also cosmometry.net, but this one has the book, and it's got some of the stuff we're going to be talking about tonight for reference. And Marshal, I was just thinking too, I think I'm starting to understand what you're talking about in ways where we could just fundamentally just have a better life and have a better place to live using some of these principles. And I've looked into things like biogeometry as well. And if you take what's going on in Portland, for example, and if anybody lives in Portland, you know, I'm not talking bad about you or anything like that, but there's just some fundamental chaos going on up there. These people that are living in the same city, I see it time and time again where they're just beating each other up and over political ideas, extreme polar things, ridiculous stuff. And they're really getting serious about it, man, like getting martial about it. There's a vibration to that, right? There's a certain vibration to that. But what if we went in there and just, this is going to sound kind of corny, but just feng shuied the whole place up, the buildings, the sidewalks, made everything just kind of sync with sacred geometry and synced it all up? Would you think that would kind of set a different tone and vibration to that city, maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe it will for sure. I mean, when there's different ways of looking at it. There's like the physical landscape, buildings, streets, materials used. Then there's the electromagnetic, which is really one of the biggest factors in our urban environments, especially, is just the massive electromagnetic frequency bands and just saturation that we're bathing in really for the first time at this magnitude in human history. And, you know, there are definite impacts of that. And those impacts can basically cause stress in the biology because they're actually introducing vibrations, frequencies that are not resonant with biology. And when we have that happening, you know, like a lot of the Bluetooth devices people are wearing and just the you know, something like the introduction of 5G, but just all the cellular technology and everything, it's very impactful and it causes a stress in the biology, which then translates to a stress in emotions and thoughts. And so if we were to eliminate that cause of stress, it would definitely contribute greatly to the reduction of what is putting people right on the edge and then getting these kinds of behaviors, which unfortunately are being, fueled by, like you said, the political arena that is very much a polarized perception. And it's a contrived system. The whole thing is contrived. That's not the nature of humans or the universe. It's not our true nature, but it's actually, people believe that it is, and then they go into this behavior that exhibits that belief into the extreme, like you're saying. So it'll definitely contribute to that, as well as there's the consciousness shift, there's the worldview shift that is going to ultimately transcend the polarized political paradigm of thinking that's what is truth, which in fact it's not.
Yeah, it's and that was just something, just like a small part of what you're talking about. That's called biogeometry, where they were looking at the pyramids and the shapes of things, how it had a certain vibration, a certain synchronicity to things on the earth. And I really feel like that the ancient Egyptian dynasties, or even the ones that whoever erected the pyramids, knew this stuff. Like they knew something about this that we don't. And I think you're tapping into this. Now, in Cosmometry.com, you have a section called Wholeness, which you say is a simplicity of pattern that underlies the complexity of manifestation in the universe. And it's due to this simplicity that the scaling from small to large occurs with seamless integrity. So is that kind of like when you look at the planets in our solar system, like Jupiter's got storms and kind of mass chaotic things. It's just not synced up the way it needs to be for human life. But Earth happens to be. Is that what you're talking about? How the wholeness kind of syncs up into one thing and makes a perfect manifestation for something?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's a good one way of looking at what wholeness is this coherent integrity. And so you could say the Earth has a coherent integrity that supports biological life as we experience it. Now, Jupiter has a coherent integrity. It's not supportive of life as we experience it, but it may be supportive of other life that we don't even know is there.
Right.
But the point is that there's coherent integrity in all the different examples: the sun, the planets, galaxies, nature, cells, down into the atoms, the protons, all the way down into the Planck field, as Nassim has been really making clear as the foundation from a quantized perspective. So there's a coherent integrity of pattern that is based on a unified wholeness that's throughout the whole of it. And so it's actually more than just sort of you're kind of referring to a localized wholeness, which is definitely what happens. Everything gets localized into a system like Earth or like Jupiter. And in each of those systems, there's a pattern integrity that is based on these fundamental principles of wholeness. And so it actually kind of is more like seeing it in a universal way, and then seeing how the universal patterns of wholeness then manifest into each of the different local expressions, you might say.
That makes sense. Yeah, I don't know why I was thinking of Earth. I think it's because so many things just line up mathematically that it seems too perfect.
Oh, yes. It's remarkable. I mean, when it's a highly, highly complex system. I mean, each of our bodies biologically is just massively complex. Yet in order to have that complexity work the way it does in this unified, whole, integrated manner, there are increasingly understood to be very simple processes that allow the communication, the information flow, that are both fractal and holographic in nature, or hologrammic is the word I use, because it has to do with information rather than graphic is more the image, like a hologram or a holograph, I should say. So, these fractal holographic, the whole of fractal nature is what allows the communication throughout the whole biological system to happen basically instantaneously. And that's what's happening throughout the universe. And so when you understand that simplicity, then you can see how the complexity arises from that and still can be whole and integrated. So that's in essence, that's what that section of the book is talking about.
Fantastic. Okay. And then the next section, you have everything starting from zero. Now, keep in mind in the book, you get really detailed into this, and I'm sure you give a lot of specific examples. But this one is starting from zero, that every time we look at a blank page or a blank canvas or an empty stage, we're experiencing, as close as we ever will, the presence of the vector equilibrium as the zero starting point for all experiential reality. Yeah, there's a lot of big words in there for me. I'm a Southern boy. What's that mean?
So the vector equilibrium, if you're not familiar with that, comes from Buckminster Fuller and his study of what he called synergetic geometry. And it's a specific, it's called an Archimedean solid. They call them platonic solids. I don't call them solids because they're not actually solid things. But nonetheless, it's a particular geometric structure that wherein all of the vectors that create the edges on the outside are equal length, and then all of the vectors that go to the center point are also of that same length. So from the center out to the points around the circumference, and then the edges that connect those points are all equal vectors. That's why he called it vector equilibrium. And it's the only geometry where this is true. And he went on to describe that when that condition exists, you have what he called the explosive force from the center point outward, like radiation energy, being contained by the gravitational force, which is the circumferential, the vectors around the outside that are all equal length from the explosive outward to the gravitational inward, which balances it into a state of zero. Basically, it zeroes all the energy dynamics completely out. And so the vector equilibrium represents the 0 point geometry that's underlying all of the dynamics that we then have experienced as the universe. And so everything that we observe, that we experience physically, in our thoughts, in vision, in hearing, you name it, is an expression of what's underlying that is actually has a 0 point state, and this is the geometry of that state.
Let's see. I got some questions coming in now. Oh yeah. Listen, if you send me 3 paragraphs or 2, just call in. We'll take your question that way. That's a big question. I might have to come back to that one. That is from Faye. Yeah, and I get some of these questions are complicated. You can't just ask it in 2 sentences, but call in. 1-800-588-0335. Man, this is such a deep subject to me. I don't know where to even go with this. I'll stay with your outline here. On section 3, the flow process, which is from the grandest to the smallest scale in the universe, there's one continuous flow of energy that finds the greatest fractal coherence in the form of a torus. Now, this is something I'm pretty familiar with, even in Western occultism and Eastern, studying Eastern spirituality. And I relate a lot of things to spirituality. You'll have to forgive me, but that's where I see these things. This toroidal field we see even in tornadoes, right? When we see storms happen and all kinds of things. Right. That's pretty much what are you talking about that, or is it something bigger?
Yeah, exactly that. There's a relationship between what we just talked about, this 0 point vector equilibrium, and the torus. And just kind of conceptually and quickly, the vector equilibrium geometry is not a stable structure. It actually can expand and contract. And Bucky Fuller called it the jitterbug. It basically is the source of oscillating vibration in the universe. From the 0 point equilibrium out of equilibrium, it pulsates. And when it pulsates, it creates, ultimately, when it's a coherent pulsation, it creates the torus. And the torus is, this, what's typically referred to as a donut-shaped form, but it's actually a flow process, and that's why I call that section the flow process, because it's really it's essential to understand that torus is not a static object. It's a process of dynamics of energy that is it's evolving. And we can see that, like you said, in a tornado, in a hurricane, the Earth's magnetic field, the sun's magnetic field, the galaxy has a dual torus around it down into our cells and the atoms. They all have this fundamental toroidal flow process because it's the form that energy takes when it comes into a dynamic state of coherent wholeness. Basically, it's kind of what nature uses to create stable whole systems that are dynamic. And
gotcha.
So that's why it occurs at every scale, because that's what coherence is in a dynamic state. And that's why you see it everywhere.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is I used to think grounding was a new age concept, right? Like everybody goes, take your shoes off and go outside and ground. And I'm like, yeah, woo, whatever. Well, you know what? Back when you try it, if you really try it, it's a whole different feeling. And if you look at the nature of the body, it's definitely set up like a battery, right? Left brain to the right side, right brain to the left side, and then you're constantly charging and discharging through digestion, through breathing. I mean, it's a battery, wake, sleep. So that balance gives you the most energy. But that toroidal field that you're talking about, they even do that in visualizations, like the middle pillar and other things. When you breathe in and you imagine this light comes out your head and goes around and
exactly right,
goes up through your feet, and you can feel it, man. Like if you really start visualizing it and working with the breath, and the more you do it, the more you feel it, then it's real. The problem is we can't really prove that to science, not yet, but not that way. But we can in other ways, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's in terms of the biofield itself. Yeah, that actually the National Institutes of Health has now an official definition for the human biofield.
Really?
They don't say they do. So they acknowledge it as something that is real and exists. And when I was writing my book, I came upon that fact. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. So it's actually now in the lexicon of medical research. And they don't describe its shape or the characteristics of it the way some of the pioneering researchers do, like a woman named Eileen McCusick, who does what's called biofield tuning. She's got some great maps of what she describes as the human biofield. And of course, there's lots of illustrations of the chakra systems and the layer of the aura from cultures from centuries ago up until modern day. Basically, overall, they all depict that toroidal field as being what exists around our biological, physical form. And, that's a whole nother level. When you get to section 7 in your descriptions, we can dive in further there and how it relates to consciousness. But, so that's just a good example of how our human system is, like when you said, you take off your shoes and you stand on the earth. So you're human toroidal biological dynamic battery, which a torus is a polarized dynamic system, just like a battery or a magnetic field.
Yeah. And
you stand on the earth. Now you're actually connecting directly into that toroidal dynamic of the earth's magnetic field. And, the geomagnetic interaction that we are, our brain waves are in the same frequency as the Schumann resonance of the Earth. Well, there's a reason for that. So
there's poles in the Earth, so there's something flowing through it for sure.
Exactly.
Or you call it gravity, but and I got this text in question, and I believe this is Blake from Fayetteville, and he makes a good point. He says, "Look, mathematics and numbers, geometry." These are all just languages that we describe realities. We have to define them somehow, right? But we see these fundamental truths. But he's wondering, how do you feel about ancient allegories or mythology before the modern sciences as ways to describe some of the concepts as geometry and mathematics today? he feels that some of these old stories and texts were the actual scientific language of the time. And you only need the key to understand the concept. So, for instance, I think I may understand what he's talking about. Like a certain ancient god or myth actually kind of represents certain energetic truths, like toroidal fields, things like that.
Yeah, I think it's very true. We call a lot of these things myths, when in fact they may be actually more like journalistic reporting, but in a kind of a language and a kind of a symbolism that we don't understand as being relating to actual experiences that may not have been, like we call them, gods that have human attributes, but they may not have been that. They may have been assigned that in order to sort of tell a story. Now, I just recently watched, I don't know if you've seen this, that's on Gaia.com. It's the Electric Universe group. They have a 6-part series on there where Wallace Thornhill and a guy named Ev Cochran are basically unpacking how the mythological stories of the past, of the gods of Mars and Venus, how they are directly related to a prior epoch of the evolution of Earth. I won't go into it too much, but it's quite phenomenal because they're saying there was actually Jupiter was actually a red dwarf star, and Earth was inside Jupiter's gravitational orbit. And there was so much plasma. It wasn't shining bright like the sun does. There was so much plasma in the field around that the Earth's atmosphere was basically lit up with this kind of purple glow that you couldn't even see out into the stars at night. And then there were huge electrical arcs coming in, and eventually our sun came in, and the electrical system of our sun overpowered that red dwarf and basically short-circuited it. And all of a sudden our atmosphere cleared and we could see planets and stars and everything around us. It's phenomenal, kind of very alternative way of looking at not only the mythology, but the fact that there was actually a human experience prior to the current solar system we now take for granted as being kind of always the way it was. So it's a really good kind of correlation to what your listener was just asking about in a way that is like, this is literally what happened physically, scientifically, that's correlated to the mythology. It's very compelling.
Yeah, even I think even in like the book The Alchemist, where, I don't want to give the book away. I hope most people have read it, where he becomes the wind and things like that, where they just represent fundamental things. I totally get what he's asking there. That's a really good question. Let's see, we're on field pattern and we got to we're at the top of the hour. I think I want to wait for that one, because that one's going to go a little deep. I mean, all these other ones can go deep too, but I've got some big questions about these as well, and about the structure of nature. And if you guys got any questions, you can talk to our guest tonight at 1-800-588-0335. There's also direct numbers 501-424-5130. Marshal Lefferts is our guest tonight. We're talking about cosmometry. Cosmometry.com is the reference. Stay with us.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
And now we can get the information.
I love magic, and on Lighting the Void, each and every week, you will get to hear shows about magic, mysticism, and many other subjects that stretch your mind and imagination. So when I got my mind on the magic and the magic on my mind, I listened to Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM. It's magic.
May the gods look with favor upon you.
You're wondering what we're going to do to you, aren't you?
I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing this journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Somewhere between abnormal and paranormal, there's a show called Into the Paranormal. I'm Jeremy Scott. Hear me live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern on the Fringe FM.
Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas, the Fringe FM's new contributing artist, Eric Tesey. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot, never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck Wonderlight Tarot are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's F-R-I-N-G-E at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com. We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves strip bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts. We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, the Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm, call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Hey, Google, I would like to become more intelligent about the unknown world around us, but I don't have time to read or go to school because I work all the time. What do you recommend?
Try listening to Lighting the Void. It's the best way to become more intelligent about the unknown world around us. Besides, I happen to think Joe Roop is the most handsome voice in radio. Listen Monday through Friday 9 p.m. till midnight Pacific time on the Fringe FM. Plus, you will hear a bonus feature called The Stranger Than Fiction News, reported by Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer. With all this information in one location, you are guaranteed to be more attractive to others in your social circle because you'll beam with intellectual wisdom.
Yeah, I think I'll try that.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Occult Arcana is a balanced and objective guide to those subjects considered a part of the nature of light and darkness. Addressed in this text is a compilation of material that will provide new perspectives and awaken latent abilities that we all possess. The content herein shall provide magical sustenance for adept and novice alike, and will help strengthen the cornerstone of mystic understanding and alchemical transmutation. If you are interested in this modern grimoire, you can find detailed information and ways to order by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. Although esoteric and occult studies remain vast, they are rooted within a universal philosophy that is difficult, if not impossible by finite terms, to explain in words. Language places restriction and erects barriers to understandings. By this it is to be understood that there are some things man should consider far too sacred to profane with definition. For these concepts and the manner by which we live our lives, we shall take a note from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Quote, "Silence is better than unmeaning words." End quote. To get your autographed copy of Occult Arcana today, simply visit www.thesecretteachings.info or email The Secret Teachings at rdgable@yahoo.com.
To call Joe, pick up the phone, dial 1-800-588-0335, toll free from the United States or Canada.
And welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. Our guest tonight is Marshal Lefferts from Cosmometry.com. That's where you can go check out his book, and for reference to what we're talking about tonight, Cosmometry, which is sacred geometry and more. I'll just say and more. Check that out for reference if you're listening tonight. And tomorrow night on the program, Dr. Michael Dane will be with us, and we're going to be going deep into the realm of Carl Jung. You know, everybody likes Carl Jung, right? So we're going to go deep into that realm and psychology as well. But tonight I really wanted to dig as deep as I can into this subject with Marshall, because this is not a subject actually I've got to talk about that much on this show. Sacred geometry kind of seems like just a part of what we're discussing tonight, and it seems so complex, and so it doesn't seem hard, though. I would say, would you agree, Marshall, that this is one of the subjects that it looks complex on the surface, but when you really just start reading and studying this stuff, you've already seen this in your life. It's in nature, it's in everything, and you know fundamentally, you can feel in your soul that this is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I start my book by saying, what I'm describing in here is actually fundamentally very simple. And even the sim with his physics, which is actually based on, these foundational concepts in the book, and I describe his physics a lot in here. He says the same thing, that when you understand, we were talking about wholeness earlier. So when you understand what the nature of wholeness is, and there are fundamental aspects of that are basically repeated everywhere in the universe, then you start to see the simplicity that it's based on. Now, from that simplicity, then you get more and more complexity. And I think what's happening more and more in our world is we're starting to see these cosmic patterns. They're cosmic in that they're not just here on Earth and just in nature, but they're patterns that are understood at the smallest scale down into the atomic, subatomic, down to the Planck scale, and then all the way out into the galactic and supergalactic universal scales. The same patterns repeating. And that's why it's a fractal, holographic and fractal model. And when you understand that simplicity, then it's actually not hard to get it. It just seems complex, and it takes a little while to get familiar. But once you do, it's like, oh, I see it. It actually is pretty simple.
Right. It is. It is. It is, and then I feel like it is, and then it isn't.
The complexity is vast.
You don't know where to start. And I got a question about, before we go to the next section, I'll have to find it because the chat room's moving so fast. I need to start highlighting these. So Amandala is wanting to know, okay, real quick. So you discussed the vector equilibrium. Is the vector equilibrium the same as the vacuum of space? Would this be where 0-point energy would generate from? Is this technically unified energy field in pure potential state? I think you understand that question. I think I understand.
Totally.
Yeah.
I know it's a great question and very well said to answer its own question. That's exactly right.
Seemed more like a statement, right?
Yeah, and then it's a good question because it's very insightful to like, okay, if this is the 0 point geometry, or this is the geometry of the state of what we call zero equilibrium, would that be the same as what we call the vacuum or the 0 point geometry? And that's exactly right. That's foundational to what Bucky Fuller was describing. And also Nassim Haramein and his unified physics model is based on exactly that same geometry. And when it gets extended universally, it's like a geometry of equilibrium that's at the center, you could say, of every vibration. It's the reference, the zero reference. And so all the vibratory systems are oscillating around this 0 point state. And when the energy gets to that 0 point, the energy is not gone, it's just not expressed. And that's why the 0 point field is not a void, it's not a vacuum, it's actually a plenum. It's actually got so much energy in it that it's, once you put it back into the physics equations like Nassim has been doing for a number of decades, and his recent papers are just nailing it with incredible accuracy, all of a sudden it starts to make sense that this so-called vacuum or void is where all the energy is coming from, just like your listener described. And yeah, the vector equilibrium is the basic geometry of what that field is like.
Wow. I think you just broke the internet, brother. So here we go. So the field pattern. This is something that I see in, and this is like if you go to cosmometry.com, section 4, you're just discussing it. So this is something I see in plant life, and I see it a lot in flowers. I don't know what's that flower. I'm bad with flowers. Girls are going to laugh at me.
Sunflower.
Yeah, the sunflower. That's right.
Yeah,
you can. It's so precise, even in that flower, that most of us should be able to look at that and say, yeah, there's this thing. There's definitely creation. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. That's what, when I see this stuff, that's how I feel. It validates some type of creative force, not some type of, random thing that happened to me. Write him down. We'll be right back.
This is Vance Nesbitt. Take the time to expand your mind by listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop right here on the Fringe FM.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
From the news center outside the city of Chicago in the great Midwest, it's the Stranger Than Fiction news right here on the Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt. Here's our headlines. Cape Cod boaters have an unforgettable brush with a great white shark. People in Cape Cod, Massachusetts got the surprise of their lives last Monday after a pair of shark sightings. The first one, which took place off the coast of Provincetown, was spotted by boaters and featured a great white that measured about 17 feet long. The creature even managed to bump the boat. In Barnstable, passengers on a cruise boat also saw a shark in the water. Several beaches in Cape Cod were closed last Monday due to reports of shark sightings. More than 180 sharks had been spotted in the area this summer, and that number may go up. Source, Microsoft News. And an extinct prehistoric bird has been spotted and reported in Arizona. A 38-year-old woman in Maricopa County says she saw a bird believed to have become extinct 3 million years ago. The eyewitness is an avid bird watcher who provided a full name and location information but did ask to remain anonymous. She told Cryptozoology News a week ago Saturday that she was driving home when she spotted the purported bird on Friday at around noon. Quote, "I was driving north on a 6-lane road. I was coming from the grocery store," she said. "I saw an extremely large bird flying very low. It was on the same side of the road but going in the opposite direction of traffic, heading south. The wingspan took up 3 lanes of traffic." The woman described the bird as having a wingspan of over 20 feet. The bird was brownish-gray color, and it was light-colored. I am a bird lover and often go into nature with my binoculars to explore birds, and I know what cranes and eagles and hawks look like. This resembled a crane but with a longer neck, but the wings were massive. It was flying so low I was concerned it could fly into a car, but it just kept soaring, she explained. She added that she didn't have enough time to grab her phone to take pictures, and that she couldn't have just stopped in the middle of the lane. In retrospect, though, I wish I would have done a U-turn and followed it. I regret not thinking of that at the time. The Arizona resident said that the bird definitely looked out of place, and that after looking it up online, it looked very much like a Palagornis sandersea. It looked and felt like it was prehistoric. When I found the illustration of that bird, it looked almost exactly like it. Source, cryptozoologynews.com. And time for another Stranger Than Fiction fringe fun fact. In the 16th and 17th century Europe, cannibalism was actually a fairly common practice, and it was all for medical purposes. The practice seems to have started because Egyptian mummies were thought to have magical curative properties, so they were ground up and put into many remedies. This has been the Stranger Than Fiction News on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Right, me old Chiners. I know it's an ad break, but before you lot shoot off and make yourself a cup of Rosie Lee or whatever else it is you're going to sling down your Gregory Peck, you need to listen to me babble. If, like me, you found your way to Light in the Void via a downloadable podcast, you might want to take a butcher's at the Fringe FM Wind and Kite. You won't Adam and Eve how many other shows there are or what they rabbit on about. Ancient history, conspiracy, the consciousness, the esoteric, the occult, metaphysics, parapolitical, ufology, technology and spirituality, to name but a few. They got featured hosts like Ryan Gable, Jeremy Scott, Alex Exum, Tim Doyle, Cortana and Gigi, Susanna Ross, the Reverend John Polk, Michael Deacon and J.D. Lewis. You might find yourself listening to the thoughts and theories of the author of The Fish you just finished reading. Or you could pick up the dog and bone, call in and tell everyone your own beliefs or experiences. So do me a favour, before you put on the Ansel or crack open a bottle of vino or roll a joint, go to the Fringe FM and see what you're missing.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Okay, we're back. We're at field pattern, right? And I'll read this again one more time, which is, within the seamlessly embedded dynamics of energy flow are the double spiral patterns that can be seen throughout nature based upon the golden ratio of phi. Cosmometry.com is the website for reference here. And I was mentioning before we had to take the break that I saw this in things like sunflowers and stuff, and this pattern makes me realize that creation is real more than anything for some reason when I see it. Am I missing something here, though, about how we can use this in different ways other than just recognizing what it truly is practically?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, just to describe it a little bit more, this is like this pattern is what you can see in nature. Like we're talking about the vector equilibrium. You're never going to see that because that's the geometry of the 0 point field. So it's not going to be visible. And then you have the torus, which is a flow process, which is sometimes visible, like, you know, in a hurricane or a magnetic field when you put iron filings around it and stuff like that. You can see that shape, but mostly it's kind of something you have to conceive and you realize, oh, wow, that's actually happening in ecology, you know, in ecosystems and in our bodies and in cells. So you can see that pattern. And now the field pattern that I'm referring to, this double spiral pattern, is actually what you see in nature mostly when it comes to seeing these fundamental patterns. And like you said, it's in the sunflowers, it's in cactus, it's in like the pine cones and the pineapple, and you can see it actually in many, many, many places and in different ways that I won't go into right now. So the thing that's to tie it together with the torus is that it's actually basically like the cross-section of the torus dynamic. You kind of took a slice out of the middle of the torus. The torus flow is kind of evolving around in that donut-shaped kind of dynamic process, and that's what's creating this pattern in nature. Now, we only see just kind of that slice of it, and then we see this double spiral pattern. And so what it tells us is that there's and it's fundamentally based on the golden ratio, the phi ratio. And the phi ratio is found throughout all of nature at all scales. And generally, scientists haven't said why that's the case. They include it in formulas and in mathematical ratios of different kinds. It's present. But they don't necessarily say, well, why is that the case? And in fact, it's actually fundamentally related to how resonance is created in the universe, and resonance is what underlies all of the manifestation in the universe from a vibratory perspective. And this comes from the work of Richard Merrick, who has a fantastic book called Interference, a Grand Musical Scientific Theory, which you can download for free at interferencetheory.com, an incredible book. And he describes how the phi ratio is both contributing to the damping of energy when it's not in resonance, to create a container of stillness, then for resonance to occur. And so when you look at like the sunflower pattern, you see these spirals that are going clockwise and counterclockwise. That's why I call it a double spiral, because they're going in both directions simultaneously. And then you see, and those patterns are created by the spaces in between. Then what are the seeds in the sunflower? And so what he's describing is that the spaces are where the energy of the field, of the unified field, of the vacuum, so, you know, field or Planck field, all the names for it, that's where the energies are getting damped back down to zero. And so we see emptiness there. And then the resonance is occurring, in this case in the sunflower, where the seeds are coming through. And so they're resonating energy coming into a coherent form. And there's this dynamic relationship. And so to answer your question about the practical application, understanding that relationship and how that's occurring in nature can inform specifically technologies that are based on resonance and frequency for healing, for balancing energetics in the body, I'm sure for balancing energetics in technologies and electromagnetic frequency, harmonization, and things like that. And again, it's understanding these fundamental principles, and in this case, the ratio and how that ratio is actually interacting with energy and matter that can inform how we design and develop technologies in the future that can be more beneficial and harmonious.
Fantastic. I will mention too, because I've already got a couple of questions, and I can't explain how it's done. I honestly can't. It's some advanced stuff. But things like when it comes to what we call magic, which is just something, we call it that because we don't understand it. When it comes to things like the Rose Cross or the watchtowers, the Enochian watchtowers, and this is really, really kind of synchronistic, and manifestation and enneagrams, things like that. If you look into those books, they specifically tell you how to use this stuff for manifestation too. And I think it's because, I don't know if it works that way because it's something physically happening, like energetically, or if it's a psychological thing. Sometimes I wonder about that, just because it's a fundamental truth. But anyway, some people are asking me about that. Yes, there's this stuff, what he's talking about in there too. So section 5 is called structural integrity, which you've got a picture of, looks kind of like a root with a triangle in the middle with roots growing out of it.
Yeah, that's good. Actually called a radiolarian. It's a microscopic organism.
Yeah, see, thank you for that. Because I'm like, look at that root. And you're like, yeah, no, that's actually really something.
Yeah.
All right, so inherent in the manifestation of energy into matter is a structural dynamic based upon the tensional integrity of quantum gravity known as tensegrity. This is, I do not know anything about this, man. Please explain.
Okay, great. Well, tensegrity is a term that Buckminster Fuller, again, he coined back in the 1930s or 40s. I don't remember, but he was a professor at Black Mountain College in North Carolina, and one of his students, a man named Kenneth Snelson, showed him a methodology for creating structure where you had struts like sticks that were not touching each other, and they were held together by taking a wire or a thread and wrapping around the ends of the sticks to create a tension. So there was a continuous tension that would then hold all these sticks, again, not touching each other, basically kind of floating in space, and create very stable geometric structures. And so the idea is that there's this tension dynamic that then coheres these compression elements, the sticks, into stable structures. And the name that Bucky Fuller gave that was, call it tensional integrity or tensegrity. And so it's a kind of an energy dynamic principle that gravity and the forces at the atomic level and basically all the relational dynamics of matter and energy coming into coherent form are based on this tension that brings them together and holds them into stable structure. And it's not like, again, it's an energy dynamic rather than like the material forms we see are coming into form because there's this tension dynamic that coheres the atoms and molecules together. Same as with then solar systems and galaxies. The gravitational tension dynamic is what coheres and brings them into form. And so it's, this section is describing that fundamental aspect of energy dynamics, just like the other sections are also describing fundamental aspects. And we're building a picture of this wholeness that is including all of those aspects. And so this one is describing especially what we find like in crystalline structures, the platonic forms, that are fundamental to all the geometry. We see a lot of those in the crystalline structures and in atomic and molecular structures. So it's more of that structural geometry kind of the aspect of it.
A structural dynamic based upon the tensional integrity of quantum gravity. And that's known as tensegrity. I'll have to say that a few times in my head to understand it, but I think I get what you're saying.
Yeah. It's an important one. And it's also, mentioning quantum gravity there. We don't want to just throw that out there, assuming that everybody agrees that quantum gravity exists. Nassim has, through his holographic mass solution in his physics, has shown that the strong force that holds the nucleus of the atom together is actually an effect of the same thing we call gravity. And it's just a different kind of a dynamic that exhibits a different strength due to the nature of what the proton is and the interaction of protons together. And so he's shown that it's the same field. And again, as we said at the beginning of the show, there's only one thing going on. So when you kind of take that perspective and say, well, how would this one thing show up in these different ways? This is what the physics is now showing us. And so he's shown that it is actually quantum gravity.
Kind of like in that movie, what was the name of that movie? You know, with Matthew McConaughey, Interstellar, where he gets stuck the end in the Tesseract.
Right. Oh, yeah,
and it shows all the intertwining gravity and how he was sending messages. Yeah, it was wild to himself through gravity, but it was kind of showing like this is the structure, kind of like what you're just saying right here, the structure of everything, but it was all into one. I don't know. It made more sense to me than other movies about those things, though.
They did a good job of kind of depicting that fractal holographic connection of everything. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I thought without explaining it, I thought they did a good evocative, kind of version of how to at least convey that idea. How, across time and space, everything is actually connected.
People in the chat are saying, my head just exploded. This is entropy. Has this guy ever worked at CERN? Have you ever worked at CERN? Okay. Section 6.
But I'm not a physicist, so they're probably not going to invite me anytime soon.
No. There's some weird stuff going on out there. Section 6, music, the master code, in a cosmos made of vibrating and oscillating quantized energy dynamics, a natural system of harmonic proportions is revealed, that which we call music. I'll buy that for $1. I think I understand that one.
Yeah. So now we're taking all the ideas that we've started with, the 0-point field, the fluctuating dynamic of a torus, this field pattern that shows up in these harmonic ratio relationships, and then the structural tension that brings it into form. So all of this is based on the resonance, vibration, frequency nature of everything in the universe. There is no actual material universe. That's just a kind of a perceptual interpretation due to our perceptual framework, the physicality. Fundamentally, of course, we all know it's vibratory systems throughout the whole thing. And so the system that is underlying that vibratory condition is a harmonic system that's actually found in the geometry very clearly, which is described in the book. And it's a 12-fold system, which is what music is. And so when you look at it from that perspective, we realize that music is, first of all, music is something we didn't invent. We actually discovered music. We can invent with music, but we did not invent music. We discovered these harmonic relationships, and then it revealed itself as this beautiful thing that we can, use instruments to create sound and harmonic relationships with and create songs. Now, that same system is present in the universe already, whether we discovered it or not. And it's what's informing the vibratory frequency resonance relationships in the atomic structures, molecules, and all the way up into, our biological systems and the cycles and frequencies that are going on in every organ and in every tissues and cells and the minerals and the vitamins and into the natural systems and into the planetary solar systems, which are all harmonically based. And so we're starting to realize that, well, it's the simplicity. Music in its very foundation is a simple 12-tone system with a set of harmonic relationships that are very well understood. But the complexity that comes out of that is so vast. And that's what makes it possible. And so this is describing how the underlying fundamental code that informs the coming into form of vibratory systems is the same thing as we call music. So it's kind of the basic nature.
So do you think we could really create, once we really get this understanding of cymatics down and vibration and music, that we could learn a whole new way to create physical things? I mean, it's kind of a woo-woo type, long ways out type deal, right? But is it for real? I mean, we already have things like 3D printers that can take a diagram, cut it out with a laser, and be done with it. We've already seen that cymatics can change geometrical shapes just by the tones. If we really understood this could be a brand new technology where we could create anything just based on sound, which would kind of change everything energetically on the planet, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm. It's a really important point you're making in that there's a relationship between sound and that we see the patterns it creates in cymatics and then form in the universe. And it's really the same thing. And one of the basic concepts that my book is describing at the foundation is that we have this relationship between electromagnetism, which is the field of light that's everywhere in the universe, and then the acoustic or sound-based aspect, which is it's another expression of energy that's not electromagnetic. It's pressure and compression based. And so if you look at these relationships from those two perspectives, we see that the electromagnetic systems that are the atoms and molecules and the matter that we experience, that we're made of, is actually coming into form based on the acoustic or compression or pressure nature of the universe. So it's like sound and light merge to create the experience of form that we have and that we are. And so with that understanding, exactly what you're saying, Joe, is that there's becoming more of an understanding of how we can influence matter using sound, which there are already technologies for improving health that are based on just sound frequency alone. Sound healers have known this for a long time, but I'm talking about advancing that into more of the scientific understanding of how do you influence the biology of the body directly, like the heart or the liver or the kidneys specifically based on frequency, and you introduce sound frequencies that help it to reestablish its natural harmonic resonance.
Yep.
These things are already here and getting close to being brought out into the world. And they're
anybody with a kidney stone
effective.
knows that,
There you go. Exactly.
And they were like,
exactly.
well, we may have to give you a sound bath. And I'm like, a sound bath?
Exactly.
I don't care what you do, just get rid of it. That's how much pain I was in, like now.
Nasty. Ugh.
Yeah, and they were explaining it to me, how they would actually, they put you in this water or whatever or something. It's kind of, it's hard for me to explain because I don't remember everything, but they focus in on the area where the stone is, and they hit it with certain frequencies to break it apart. Yeah. But it also, the doctor was explaining how the frequencies help the flow of everything too,
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. And so it's a great example of how effective sound can be on physical systems. And then I think to your question about can we create form, ultimately with some kind of a 3D printing, sound-based cohering technology to create objects and things, I think probably so. I haven't seen it, and I'm not aware of that development. I wouldn't be surprised if it's happening somewhere, but it makes sense that ultimately would be the case.
We might be talking about right now, let's get a little sci-fi. I mean, science fiction's always come in science reality anyways, but right now we might actually be discussing what alien technology really is and what we're going to be advancing to in the future. I mean, if Bob Lazar's spaceship is real, the one he talks about how there were no edges and everything seems seamlessly like formed together on this ship, and the gravity propulsion field that he's talking about, they still never figured out. It has to do something with all of this. It absolutely has to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great example of when you understand the really fundamental principles that form, structure, and then consciousness are all based on. Because my understanding is those alien tech crafts are guided strictly through thought and consciousness, not a steering wheel in your hands. There's a direct relationship to that field coming into form and cohering in a way that is not, pieces and riveted together and all that. It's because, there's a understanding this fundamental nature allows us to then tap into it in ways that we're just beginning to imagine. And the thing is that we're starting to get the science of it now. And it's when you get the science of it that then the mind can actually go, oh, it's real. I get it now. And now I can actually design and build something because I understand the foundation of how it's working. And I think we're at the threshold of that. I know we're at the threshold of it. I don't think it's what I call actually like normalizing cosmic consciousness. Like many people throughout the world, increasingly every day now are going, oh, I get this higher understanding. There's something bigger even than, our experience of being on this planet that I'm beginning to understand and resonate with. And that used to be just called like a special case cosmic consciousness would happen to somebody. But I think it's now happening collectively to our whole field of human consciousness on the planet. And ultimately, it becomes normalized. And I think that has to happen in our progression here on the Earth. We're talking about this critical transition we're going through. And we have to go from this fairly kind of ignorant and arrogant and adolescent paradigm that has been very successful and made incredible advances, but has also caused these massively not good challenges across all of our systems. And we have to make that transition. And in order to do so, we need some bigger context and a larger paradigm of understanding in order to evolve into it. And this is what I feel is happening. It's this normalizing of cosmic consciousness, meaning it's not some far out thing. It's actually just the way things are. And when we understand it, we'll create those kinds of tech that you're talking about.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I mean, I really can't wait. Seriously, it's kind of like we believe because we're in the future in 2019 that we're evolved. But I really think that there was a race of beings that I'll bring back to the pyramids again that understood a technology, this type of technology.
There's no doubt.
A natural, fundamental, cosmological, or cosmometry, I guess, technological truth that they could use this for anything, or these fundamentals for anything. We're kind of not headed that way. We're headed in a way of materialism and, I don't want to get on a rampage here. But.
We have been, we definitely have been. I mean, the whole scientific paradigm went wholeheartedly in that direction. And that's why we kind of disconnected ourselves from appropriate relationship with nature and the cosmos. And we limited our capacity. Like we were talking about on the break about Tesla, he completely got this. And then he was squashed from developing it because it threatened the materialist paradigm too much for those who wanted to make money off of it, basically. And if we had actually embraced that and brought it into our scientific models and in our academia and developed technologies going forward from Tesla, from Royal Rife, who was curing cancer, Walter Russell and his knowledge and insights, and Bucky Fuller, who's still just barely even considered in academia, we would have figured this out 100 years ago, and we'd have already have all this stuff. And we're at that threshold now, and that's the good news, is that it's not far off. We're talking 5 to 10 years. We're going to see such amazing changes, because it's you can't hold it back. Ultimately,
do you think do you really believe this is going to happen regardless? Right.
Well, if we don't blow the show, if we don't blow the show somehow on this planet, yes, it will happen. I don't see how it could not happen, because either if it doesn't happen, the whole thing will collapse and we'll blow the show. Now, most people on the planet don't want that. Most people want to have a planet that's thriving, and we can accomplish that now because we do have the knowledge, and the technologies do exist and are coming now into the world to make that possible. And it's not far off. We're not talking decades. We're talking years, and maybe a couple of decades for the larger transition, maybe longer. But it's here and now, and it's going to be starting. It is already starting now. Let's put it that way.
Well, it seems like a battle too, because you got that going on, innovation, and then you've also got 5G, aluminum particles in the air. Monsanto getting a patent for getting the patent for the seed to grow in aluminum, because they want to control the food. And you got me with the conspiracy theory brain going, yeah, eventually they're going to we're going to be all in a big microwave, and all they got to do is hit a button and literally shut you down if you breathe in enough aluminum. I mean, 5G is kind of scary when you look at it, right? So it's, I think we're in a fight right now, actually. And I'm hoping it's just a birthing process that we'll wake up from, and we'll fix this.
It's definitely I always try to figure out how to shift it from being a fight to being maybe just a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And
feels like a fight to me, though.
Yeah, we have to definitely not let things happen that are detrimental, and that's where we need to fight against them. I definitely feel it's in some cases of vital importance, and thankfully that's happening. And then at the same time, as we were saying earlier, we need to innovate that which will obsolete those things. And we are, and they do exist. Like, there's a company in Texas called Zenic Power. I don't know if you've heard of them. They've recreated Tesla's tower, basically, the Wardenclyffe Tower. Yeah, and they've been developing it for like 20 years. And these are guys who come out of, military, governments, very high level, that are, they know these people are not dumb. They're very, very smart, even if they've been on the inside of that big machine. And some of them go, that big machine is not the answer, and it's actually going to collapse because it's not sustainable, like oil and, current paradigms in medicine and everything. They're not working, and they're not long-term solutions.
No, it's making things worse.
It's making things worse. And so, apparently they have now a working technology, which is soon to be launched, as far as I understand it, for wireless electrical energy transmission and wireless communications, which, Tesla was just doing energy
wireless electrical energy transmission.
Yeah, that's what the Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, and that's why he was shut down, because, where do you put the meter, So from what I've come to understand about this particular group, they're poised to introduce that into the world, which, when you have both energy and communications at high speed that is not detrimental, then it'll obsolete 5G. You won't need that anymore. It becomes a cumbersome, expensive, dangerous technology that already people don't want. But this will enable there to be an option. And until there's an option, then you're just in the fight. But when there's an option, now you're just obsoleting the opponent. And that's really going to be the solution.
I like your attitude about it, actually. I'm always trying to pick a fight with these people. Maybe we just got to get them to understand the benefits of it,
Well, that's a good thing. We gotta at least call that crap, for what it is. I think that's extremely important, and there's a very valuable role in doing that. And then it's really important to see what the options are that are emerging, and we're going to talk about some of these things in Thrive 2, which is going to come out in 2020.
Nice. I shared that link, by the way, Thrive, which is a free. You can tell them what that is. I dropped it into the Discord chat, and I'll drop it in there again.
Yeah. So Thrive is a documentary film that came out in 2011, created by Foster and Kimberly Gamble, and it's really Foster's. He's one of the most phenomenal researchers I've ever met across a vast range of topics. And so Thrive looks at this understanding of the fundamental patterns that we've been discussing, the vector equilibrium, the torus, how we can base energy generating technologies on accessing from the field, and how Tesla knew that, and how we could have had these technologies, and we can see evidence through, the alien technologies that are, depicted in ancient cultures and in crop circles. I mean, it just covers such a wide range. And then, well, why don't we have it? Why didn't we have what Tesla was offering us? Well, there's a global domination agenda that is suppressing all this stuff, which is what we've been talking about. That conspiracy is very real. It's not a made-up fictitious thing. It's this, the more you look into it, the more it's very obvious that it was set up to be a controlling system.
Exactly.
By those who knew how to do it and had the money and power to do so. So their natural inclination was, let's control it because we can. And then that built up to this huge machine that doesn't want to die. That's like somebody's life there. That's their worldview. They want to keep it. Well, that's not sustainable, and it's problematic. And so Thrive looks at the roots of that whole area and the challenges that we're facing. And also then it goes into the solutions that we can bring into the world based on understanding these fundamental patterns, and how we can create healthy, whole, vibrant systems to create thriving in the world. So that's kind of the quick overview of the arc of the film, but there's a ton of information in there.
Well, I'm all for it, because right now I feel like that we're being sold a batch of freedom fries, that's like, it's kind of like, a friend of mine used this the other day. Like the cows think they're free, but really there's a fence that holds them all in, right? And you give them their food, and they feel free. They can do what they want, say what they want, unless they get out of line. But they're really not free. And then when I see things like this happen in 5G, no matter how many people warn them against it, they still do it for money reasons. Things like autonomous weapons for the military, even when rich people like Elon Musk, who God knows what's really going on there with that agenda, but going to the UN and other places saying, hey, don't do this, they still do it. The chemtrails, that thing, they only have to go down that road, right? And then you got the food industry. Monsanto comes out and says, well, we're going to patent this so we can be the only one that has a seed that can grow in aluminum soil.
Yeah.
Now think about that. I mean, a friend of mine, when he told me that, I said, what? He goes, I know you think I'm wrong. I don't want you to see if I'm wrong. I dare you to try to prove me wrong. So I went and looked into all this, and I'm like, wow, it's pretty freaky. So I feel like I got to fight that, if that makes sense to you.
I appreciate that. I think it's very important. And, thankfully that is what's happening. And we're seeing more and more the stopping of these things, the banning of Monsanto in countries and in regions, and more governments are saying, well, I'm not so sure about this 5G thing. We better halt that and take a look at it before we approve it. So this is really good signs that the willingness to pause before acting, or to, retroactively, or to stop something that is already happening, like the GMO and the patenting of seeds and all that stuff. It's happening in the world, and it's vitally important that what you're saying. is occurring, to fight it, to challenge it, to call the shit where we got to call the shit, and stop it because it's detrimental. And there's actually, I would say, a pathology in a certain element of the human family here that is a small percentage of the human family, but it's a very powerful aspect that has set up these systems, is dominating and controlling, but it's based on a kind of a pathological paradigm of belief. And that's part of the challenge is in a way it's so hard to change minds. And that's why Buckminster Fuller always said it's better to create new systems that can obsolete the old ones than just to try to fight the old ones, because there's a lot of resistance there. And
like
so
these guys out here in Texas, right? If they erect this tower. By the way, Ramblin' Randy just sent me a message with a picture. I guess he passed it up and actually looked at the tower. It's kind of cool looking outside of Waco. If they get enough attention, I see what you're saying. If they get enough attention with this thing and say, look what this does, this is a way better system. Hopefully, it'll get put in the media enough to where they'll have to do it. That would be nice, right? And
with all these very kind of large infrastructure changes, like energy is fundamental to everything. And so how we produce and access energy is obviously in the world right now causing a lot of detriment. Now, in order to shift to a completely different paradigm of energy source and generating and transmission, it's entirely, it's fundamentally disruptive to the current system. And so there's an important and necessary strategy that has to be put in place prior to just throwing something out there and, kind of just sort of seeing what happens in the disruption. There has to be, I think, both compassionate care, and in order to succeed, it needs solid business and security and infrastructure development, and all of these things need to be properly put in place before they're brought into the world, so it can actually succeed.
Right.
I think that's what's happening.
It is definitely happening. That's what's happening, and I wanted to save these two for you. Consciousness and the human experience is kind of what we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And then the next octave, which is really cool. Go check it out. Cosmometry.com. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about at the bottom of the page. We're here with Marshal Lefferts. We'll be right back.
This is Sammy. Join us in the Deep South as we're lighting the void with Joe Roop on the Fringe FM.
Parabnormal News, I'm Brad Bernards from the Oregon Bigfoot Festival. The 2020 Revolutionary Aerospace Systems Concepts Academic Linkage, or RASCL competition, is soliciting undergraduate and graduate teams to develop new concepts that leverage innovations for NASA's Artemis program and future human missions to Mars, according to NASA. This year's competition branches beyond science and engineering with a theme dedicated to economic analysis of commercial opportunities in deep space. Here's an idea.
Collect the most water in 2 days. I think that's ice. The graduate and undergraduate teams came to NASA Langley to test their prototype systems, capable of extracting water from ice deposits buried beneath simulated lunar or Martian soil.
As the agency prepares for human space exploration beyond low Earth orbit, the moon has become a near-term proving ground for the technology, science, and human exploration efforts critical for future missions to Mars. The Rascal competition is a university-level engineering design challenge. NASA and industry experts will select up to 15 teams to continue developing their proposed concepts. The projects will be presented at a competitive design review during the June 2020 Rascal Forum in Cocoa Beach, Florida. The supermassive black hole at the heart of the Milky Way, Sagittarius A star, is relatively quiet. It's not an active nucleus spewing light and heat into the space around it. Most of the time, the black hole's activity is low-key with minimal fluctuations in its brightness. Most of the time. Recently, astronomers caught it going absolutely bananas, suddenly growing 75 times brighter before subsiding back to normal levels. I was pretty surprised at first and then very excited. Astronomer Tuan Do of the University of California, Los Angeles told Science Alert. The black hole was so bright I first mistook it for the star SO2 because I had never seen Sagittarius A star that bright. I knew almost right away there was probably something interesting going on with the black hole. But what? That's what astronomers are on a mission to find out. Read the news at parabnormalradio.com. I'm Brad Bernards, Parabnormal News.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? Cannasense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. Cannasense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the cost, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and Cannasense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
Ahoy there. Gigi here from Shift Happens. Do you like to boogie down to topics such as ufology, the occult, and the mysteries behind our reality? Well, I invite you to join us every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, that's 10 p.m. Eastern, as we like to punch that curiosity button and tickle that fancy. We tickle that fancy, but yeah, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but there's certainly a lot of tickling going on over here at Shift Happens.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
AncientLifeOil.com. For your CBD needs, just remember, AncientLifeOil.com. What does it do for the body, you ask? I can't say due to the people in the suits that run the industry. Big Pharma's all over CBD because of its well, you know what I mean. Research the benefits of CBD on Google and come back to AncientLifeOil.com and purchase your CBD today. Non-GMO and all organic. You don't want to be using a petroleum product. You want to be using the cleanest CBD product on the market. AncientLifeOil.com. We even have CBD for your pet. Help your pet's discomfort. Help your discomfort. Log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Newly reduced prices to pass off the savings to the most important person. You. AncientLifeOil.com. And one more thing. We have topicals too. So if you have joint pain and some different issues that are going on in your body, you might want to use a topical. Think about it. AncientLifeOil.com.
Alex Exum.
This is Alex Exum of the Exum Experience in Live Talk, where we discuss current events, society, and culture. My shows are based in actuality, actual existence, contrasted with what was intended, expected, or believed. You can listen to me live Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 7 p.m. only on KTLK, The Fringe FM.
You are listening to the Fringe FM, and I'm Michael Deacon reminding you can find my show right here on the Fringe FM every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, or by going to michaeldeacon.com. The choice is yours.
You're listening to Lighting the Void. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. If you would like to text, you can text in at 501-777-5631.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. Tonight we're here with Marshal Lefferts. Don't forget, after the program is The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable. We're here for you 5 nights a week. 5 nights a week, 9 p.m. to midnight, and then Ryan comes on midnight to 3 a.m. Pacific. And Marshal Lefferts is here with us. He is the author of a really cool book that I guess I'm going to have to pick up. I'm going to have so many books, but this is another one, Cosmometry, exploring the holofractal nature of the cosmos. And that's what we've been talking about tonight. We've been exploring this together, kind of going over these concepts. Real quick, I want to say, too, that our Halloween special is coming up pretty close. I want to get you guys' mind wrapped around this thing because we've got something really special planned for you. And this is one of those deals where we've got to reach a certain funding. So if you donate to us and you write in on the notes, this is for the Halloween special, you're not going to regret it. Okay, so if you go to squareup.com/store/Exum, and I'll drop that in the chat too. That's going to get us the equipment we need to perform what we're going to be performing on Halloween night. And that's all I'll say about that. We'll keep talking about that as we go along. And Marshal, again, thank you for staying up with us late nighters. I don't know, is this your first time you've been on a late night talk radio program? Is this your first experience?
I think it's the latest I've been on one so far.
Oh, man, I love that. I love it when it's the first time, because these are your people here, right?
Yeah. That's good.
I was mentioning to you during the break how I get upset when I talk about things like 5G and Monsantos and chemtrails, and how it all just kind of looks like it's it looks more than a conspiracy to me. It looks real, all right? It doesn't seem like a conspiracy to me. It makes me want to go to war and fight them and get upset and stomp. But there's something else that I truly believe that what we can do to beat these people and beat them at our game instead of theirs. And I see that in what you're showing here. I believe truly that if we all really learn who we are fundamentally, consciously, and learn how to become more effective explorers of our own nature and consciousness, that enough of us will wake up, whether you're doing astral travel, magic, I don't care. We'll all start waking up and creating things in a better way where they cannot resist us anymore, right? And in section 7 here, you have consciousness and the human experience, which is, attributes of intelligence, awareness, and reflexivity are intrinsic to the very structure of the cosmos, illuminating the presence of consciousness at all scales. And this is kind of what I'm talking about, how we can tap into our own potential, the stuff that's been hidden from us, and make things happen the way we want to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so fundamental to the shift we're in at this time, because it's who we are. It's who we are in the deepest sense of being, not just the physical, biological, and the world and nature, but in the real existential relationship to being in this cosmos. And so this section is going into understanding how the relationship of consciousness and this human experience that we have is happening along with the physics, the science, the music, the patterns in nature that is kind of featured throughout the rest of the book. How does this tie into our our personal experience. And so the basic premise, which comes very much out of Nassim Haramein and William Brown and Amir Balbaker's work, these research scientists with the Nassim Haramein Resident Science Foundation. So there's an understanding of how the cosmological model and the physics model describes the underlying nature of the universe to be this ubiquitous field of not only light and sound energy, but information. In fact, light and sound are the carriers of information. That's the reason we can even talk over these electronic signals or electromagnetic transmissions and then hear each other, translated from electromagnetism into acoustic impulses that we can hear. It's because, and then interpret as words and information, because that's the fundamental nature of the energy that's present everywhere in the universe. And so the information aspect it's present throughout the entire structure. That's what it's saying in that little description, which then has the attributes of what we call consciousness and what we experience as human consciousness. And our experience is just one version of what can be experienced and I believe is experienced throughout the entire cosmos. For instance, down at the atomic and level of the atomic and the electrons and their interactions, it was even David Bohm, the physicist, who said you can see these behaviors in plasma, which is where you have like a whole field of electrons free from atoms moving, and they start coordinating into this very natural, organic, looking like a flock of birds in murmuration, moving all together. So there's some kind of a group awareness that starts to come into what we think is just sort of these, inorganic, non-conscious particles. So that's just an example of how we've seen some of these behaviors just in the fundamental physics. But when you kind of look at the nature of the universe, and not only the physical universe, but the informational aspect as being a unified field, like I said at the beginning, there's only one thing going on. And so when you include the attributes of consciousness into that model, all of a sudden it starts to make a lot more sense how a complex biological system like we have, that is self-aware, that knows that it knows, can arise from that entire structure constantly reinforcing in this feedback, feed-forward process throughout the whole system. As it gets more and more complex, that becomes more and more information that's feeding back into itself in the cycle that now becomes self-aware and organizes not from a random process, but from a process that is including this learning from the feedback. And so it lays a foundation for not only getting a sense of who we are, but in fact that we are in a field that is what we would call consciousness everywhere. Our version of consciousness is not necessarily the same thing that's happening in other places, but it's still the same field. And it changes our relationship to it entirely when we start looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on this. Man, I mean, I don't know how else to say what you just said. You said it perfectly. I don't know what it is about. So there's this whole idea of waking up in consciousness, how symbols, meditation, things like that, they start just waking us up in awareness, right? We have epiphanies. We start waking up to bigger and higher versions of ourself. Also, another thing that I wonder about that folks are asking in the chat room is, how does this work with DNA, right? Are we really turning on different links of our DNA when we do this? Is our DNA being manipulated? Have you ever looked into any of that compared to your studies on cosmometry?
Yeah, well, there's kind of two things to say about that coming to my mind. The first is that, our biological system in this model is really a fractal antenna. Our brain, heart, central nervous system, solar plexus, all that, these nerve plexus that are interacting with the electrical signals, transmitting them, is really a fractal antenna system that is interacting with the field that we were just talking about, and that we have a localized field, like we were talking about, that aura around the body, that biofield. Well, that's actually, in this model, a field of consciousness itself, and that's who we are. We're not just the biological. We're actually, the biological is more of like an outpicturing of a fundamental blueprint that we would call consciousness, or like the field creating a hologram that we are then, coming into form through the gestation process. And, now that ties into the DNA. And so if you think of the DNA now as a code that is storing a blueprint of that, that which is coming into form, that is actually interacting with that same field. That field is actually informing, informing the DNA, and informed by the expressions, the gene expressions that then create all the different cellular systems and structures and brings it into form. And then when it comes into form, like we are now in our bodies, that same interaction is still taking place. Both in the biology, that's, it said that the DNA is communicating instantaneously to all the other DNA throughout the body, not, through nerve signals, taking pathways and communicating that way, but actually through impulses, biophotonic impulses, and even sonic impulses that instantly communicate throughout the whole biology. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but into the extended field around us. And so this is where, the epigenetics work, where it's becoming more apparent that our minds and consciousness and emotions are actually affecting DNA and causing it to create different expressions, rather than the other way around.
See,
the DNA is not the central driver in that case.
This is what I was trying to talk about last night with Stavish is, in hermetics and stuff, it's not a moral system just to be moral or whatever. It's not a system of religion. It's an energetic system. I mean, hermetics talks about as above, so below, right? That's fractals. That's fractality. Small principles here are larger principles in the cosmos.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So,
and
as
it's
a human,
a beautiful, simple statement, and it is true.
Exactly. I mean, like, as a human, we're no different. So if we work on ourselves, if we understand all these principles, and we work on our energetic nature before we start trying to take on other things, it's kind of like, when you plug in a heater or something into an outlet that can't take it, right? Mm-hmm. You have to be ready for that energy to come in. And that's what hermetics is all about, as above, so below. And I see things like that, that I wonder about with the electric universe and the star systems. Well, how does that relate to below here on Earth or in Malkuth or whatever? Well, it's like, we just figured out we can send information through light and fiber optics. We're using light to transfer data. That could be a smaller fractal form of a cosmological truth that's happening in the universe. These rules don't change,
Yes, the reason we can do that is because that's how it is working in the universe.
Exactly. Yeah.
We just discovered, oh, wow, that works. We can do that. Now we put it into application. And that is happening throughout the whole universe. That's why you could say consciousness or the intelligence or the reflexivity, all those attributes are present throughout the whole system of the universe.
Yeah, and I think the problem with that is people they don't like the hard stuff, or they want to believe in some type of salvation where they've already passed it. And you know what? Maybe you can transcend that stuff energetically, but I still believe that you have to become sound in mind, body, emotions, spirit, desire, and get that. I mean, that's what the 5-pointed star is all about. You guys seen The Fifth Element, right? Everybody's seen that movie? You got to get all the elements together before you can handle that jarring energy of love and kundalini, and when your energy awakens. And can you imagine, as smart as some of you are now, some of you that call in, and you and everybody else, how intelligent we are and how more aware we are, that there's even more bigger things to learn that we're preparing ourselves for, or we should be. I'm going on a rant again, Marshall, save me here.
No, I think it's true. And, you know, we are so much greater and more than we've been taught we are, for one, both in the science and the paradigm, as well as the academic, you know, institutions, and what we're being taught of who we are is so extremely limited now that we're understanding this deeper nature of the universe, this ubiquitous holographic exchange of information everywhere. You know, it explains in the model, in the scientific model, physics model, things like remote viewing and psychic phenomenon and all that kind of, you know, seemingly fringe science actually now has a context to be true. And when you have that, now we actually have a sense of who we are that suddenly gets much bigger and more real. And we can trust it basically more as our true nature. And, you know, that's a really important shift. And it's part of this whole shift that's happening now. You know, that's what I kind of call this normalizing of cosmic consciousness. Like, wait a minute, that's who we are. You know, that's not some far out weird woo-woo or science sci-fi, you know, idea. It's who we are. And let's embrace it. You know, let's be it.
Talk to me about the next octave. This is an interesting graphic that you're showing here that reminds me of things like the double cube of space, and I'm thinking of older text here, obviously, like the Sefer Yetzirah, which is basically a rabbi explaining 3D reality through astrological and Hebrew letters. I mean, this stuff's been hidden in nature. It's always been here, like you're saying. It's always been here. It always will be. But there's something about this picture that's kind of showing me the largest all the way down to the atom. Am I looking at this wrong? I'll tell you what, I'll read it too. It says, a shift in the evolutionary journey is at hand, portending an era of harmonious relationship with life and the cosmos at a new level of coherence and integrity. That's basically what you believe is happening right now.
Yeah. So, this section is called the next octave because when you think of the frequency relationship of our whole reality, and you think about, you know, where are we at as a species on this planet? What's our kind of vibratory condition, and where are we heading? And how can we get to a place where we're harmonized rather than in dissonance like we are now? And so I suggest that we're actually at the threshold when, in music, any musician who's, you know, really kind of experienced this knows that when you have two notes that are just right off from each other, one's at like one note and one's at a half step below that note, you get this vibratory tension that's extremely, like, it wobbles and beats, and it's very intense kind of dissonant sound. But when you then shift that second note, that lower note, up to that, to match that one that was above it, that comes into unison at the next octave. And all of a sudden everything just goes, wow, you know, it just comes into this beautiful, relaxed, beautiful, harmonic unison state. And I feel like that's where we're at right now. We're at that threshold right before hitting that next octave, where everything will come into this harmonized system, technologically, in our consciousness, in our social systems. We have the option to do it. It's not guaranteed, but it is I think it's guaranteed from the sense of all we have to do is apply these ideas and principles into our technologies and all the other aspects. And it will happen because that's the way the universe and nature already is succeeding and thriving. You know, it's not, I don't know, this sounds simplistic. It's a huge, challenging job to make that shift. But I feel confident that by applying these ideas towards that direction, then we are supported entirely from the universe to do so and to succeed. And I just want to talk about that graphic you're mentioning, which your listeners won't see what it is, but for your sake, and they can look on the website and see it there in Section 8. And that is actually depicting that 0-point geometry, the vector equilibrium, and the extended field of those vectors. That's called the isotropic vector matrix. It's the same equilibrium geometry that is underlying, the whole field of space in the 0 point. So that's what you're seeing in that illustration there. And it ties directly into the harmonic structure of music, which is foundational within that same geometry. So that's why it resonates for you in that way, I think.
Yeah, it does feel like it's everything. I mean, it's got, if you really look at it, it's got everything in it. Who did? That's cool. If you don't mind me asking, did you do these drawings, or did you get somebody else to do them for you?
I have a friend in the UK who did the 3D graphics. He developed 3D models for a lot of those illustrations that are in the book. And then I did a bunch of them myself in Adobe Illustrator for the 2-dimensional illustrations, and then, found a whole bunch of others. There's over 400 illustrations in my book. From different sources. But yeah, that one and others that you're looking at are either from the 3D graphics guy or my own illustrating.
Man, I tell you what, this is one of those things where, it's a deep truth, and I'm just curious. This is something most people ask in the beginning of a show. But we got to take our last break. But I kind of want to get into your story a little bit, if you don't mind. Would that be cool?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
All right. We'll be right back with Marshal Lefferts, guys. Don't go anywhere.
Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to the Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on the Fringe FM.
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. They say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of the Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
Greetings, galactic community. This is Suzanne Ross, host of Sci-Spy Radio, every Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific. Join me for this brand new show featuring a revolutionary new genre, Sci-Spy, merging science and spirituality to give us answers to the greatest mysteries of creation. Together, scientific discovery and spiritual revelation reveal the truth about who we are, where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. Tune in to Sci-Spy Radio every Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific and discover the truth for yourself at thefringe.fm.
You know, food was different 60 years ago. It was minimally processed, free of pesticides. It was nourishing and healthful for your body. Today, GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, and heavy processing have depleted the nutrition of our food supply, which takes a toll on our health and energy. It's harder than ever to get the right nutrition. That's what Life Change Tea is meant to counteract. Our specially blended, powerful herbal formulas can give you more energy without caffeine. It's a mild cleanse, a mild daily detox. A good detox can help revive and bring back the energy of your youth. GetTheTea.com is the website. It'll cleanse you from the inside out with this herbal proprietary formula. Go to GetTheTea.com. There's no fillers, no GMOs. It's organic. Not available in stores. You must go to their website, GetTheTea.com. And their supplements are a great way to maintain your health. Read the testimonials on the website. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com.
Listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Also, lots of fabulous questions in the chat room and statements. So many that I just don't know how to get to all of them. We're here with Marshal Lefferts from Cosmometry.com. I did drop that image in the chat room so everybody could see that. And it's just what you're saying. That's just 0 point energy, just compounded on itself, right? But it looks super complicated, but it's actually really simple. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's that vector equilibrium geometry extended in all directions, and the layers you're seeing in there are vector equilibrium. That's also called a cube octahedron in terms of the geometric form, and they just, it's just basically a fractal structure that is the 0 point structure throughout all of space. So it's super simple in that regard, but out of it comes enormous complexity.
I was talking to you during the break about something, and I wanted to share it with everybody and see. And you mentioned something that I think might be important because I've been trying to piece this together for a long time. When when we look at stuff like this, when we become more aware of sacred geometry and all of these fundamentals, frequency, everything, and we go back and say we read an old story or an old text, like the Bible, for instance, or Revelation, something that our parents made us believe when we grew up, like mine did. And I read the part in there where he talks about the gates, how the gates of the kingdom of heaven are that of a man, of an angel. And I drew that out, and that was a pentagon that had 12 equal sides, and the length and the width and the height of it was the same. So that tells me it's a 3-dimensional shape, and all the walls were equal. So now I've got a dodecahedron, and on each wall, okay, is each tribe. And each tribe, if anybody understands Kabbalah, mysticism, all that, they know it corresponds to the constellations. So now I'm looking at a dodecahedron with each constellation on each face. And I'm thinking, now, if you take that story literally in Revelations, which you shouldn't because it's allegory, they tell you not to do that. What are we looking at here? And then you mentioned something about the 12 notes. Go ahead with that, because I'm taking notes as you say this.
Yeah, well, yeah, this kind of embedded code of understanding in these ancient texts and scriptures is very, very fascinating and a deep, deep study unto itself. But yeah, I mean, that particular one with the dodecahedron, it directly correlates to the system of music, which is some of the work that Richard Merrick in his book Interference describes very clearly, as it does also to the DNA and the codons of the DNA. And so it's actually describing, whether it's in the allegory and the astrological relationships of the tribes, or the system of music, or the DNA, there's a fundamental aspect of what we would call a 12-fold system, which the vector equilibrium is that. It's actually a 12 around one system. You can take 12 balls and pack them around one central ball, and it creates the vector equilibrium where all the vectors are the same. And the dodecahedron is a kind of a variation of that, where you have the 12 faces all equally spaced in this spherical geometry. And this is the fundamental system. You mentioned the binary system at the beginning, and in the book there are 3 fundamental systems that are weaving together to basically, in a kind of the level of the simplicity, reveal how these structures are emerging based on these systems. And one, I call it the binary, which is the octave doubling, where you're doubling and halving the ratio to create octaves in music, and just doubling and halving scale in the universe. That's the binary system. And then you have the one based on the phi ratio, 1.618, which is actually, won't go into it now, but it's actually very closely correlated to the binary in a significant way, with a slight deviation that makes it create the ability for form to grow, essentially. So the phi ratio, I call it the finary. You've got the binary and the finary, and then you've got this 12-fold system, that music, and you find these 12 relationships of the 12 throughout not only the spiritual and allegorical systems, but in nature and in structures throughout the universe, in music, for example. And so these 3 weave together in this whole system that then is manifesting in the different ways, and the complexity comes out of it. But it directly ties into exactly what you're talking about, Joe, reading that in the scripture. And it's really cool that you actually saw it for what it's describing, and you came up with that. That's really awesome.
Well, he also relates each wall to a jewel too, like a pearl, like a ruby. And, so my whole life I've been trying to pick that apart, like trying to decode that,
Yeah.
And I even talked to Jordan Maxwell about that, and somebody else, and they were like, no, it was Richard Allen Miller, and he has a whole paper on that. And it goes back to Pythagoras. Makes you wonder who John of Patmos was, who really wrote that book, who really put that stuff in there, because it speaks as if a great apocalypse is coming to the earth or something. But what if that's just really you? What if that represents consciousness in itself? there's a lot to this stuff to look at, and I know for a fact that whoever wrote the New Testament, I'm sorry, but they hid stuff in there, man. Huge secret stuff. Why?
Yeah, Nassim has done a lot of. He took some time to really go through that and unpack a lot of that, and some of that is touched into in our online program, Resonance Science Foundation. It's called the Delegate program, exploring the connected universe. And there's a module in there on ancient cultures, and I can't remember what it's called right now, but it goes into the ancient cultures aspect of it. And some of that's unpacked in there, related to the Bible and some of the scripture and the Ark of the Covenant, and tying it into Egypt and the pyramids. And yeah, there's a lot there. That's a whole deep subject.
Yeah, it is. And I just want people to think about that for a minute. Help me decode that kingdom of heaven structure in Revelations. I think once, like you're talking about, we're all consciousness. Once we really start, I think when we start putting stuff together like that, when we go with our intuition, we'll come up with an answer together, instead of trying to fight about literal dogma. And
nicely said.
Was your upbringing kind of like mine, or were you different? When did you get into sacred spirituality and sacred geometry and things like this?
Yeah, my upbringing was different. I think I went to church twice in my life, and I think the second time I was about maybe 6, and my memory is with my mom and I getting into a laughing fit. So that was my experience of being in church. And
you got to a laughing fit? That's hilarious.
Yeah, like, one of those uncontrollable laughter things, and we're like, oh my God, this is not the right moment to be laughing. So that's my memory of going to church, which I think is a good memory. I like it. And I didn't read the Bible, and I didn't read any scripture. I wasn't raised in that way. And as I said earlier, when I was 19, I had this kind of frying pan over the head waking up experience in my first year of college that popped me into a different state of consciousness. And I knew now there was something bigger going on. I didn't know what it was. I wasn't suddenly healed of all my, my challenges and problems of being a person in the world. And so I still have been on the same path as everybody else, but I took from that point on, I took a very alternative route. Not in mainstream academia. Just like 3 months later, I came upon Buckminster Fuller's writings. I'm like, whoa, this is something here that I really need to pay attention to. And so I started reading his books and understanding what he was saying, and he was definitely involved in the bigger picture of what's going on in the world and serving the success of humanity. I mean, he dedicated his whole life to serving the success of humanity. So he was a major influence on me. Then I also studied Aikido at that time, and Aikido is, it's a martial art, a modern day martial art that's founded in the last century by a Japanese martial arts master who had the realization that the purpose of martial arts is to harmonize ourselves with each other and with nature, basically to harmonize with the cosmos. And so he founded Aikido to do just that. And it's a great model for what you're kind of wrestling with, is it a fight, or can I somehow, in Aikido, you blend and merge and redirect that energy and then neutralize it, basically, rather than hit it straight on. It's a beautiful martial art. And it's a really important kind of principle and paradigm for how we can make this shift. So that really informs me a lot. And then I just took a completely alternative path, just opening up to understanding, what are the resources out there. Of course, it's long before the internet, so you find the books you find, the people you find, you connect, you network. And eventually I got a lot of insight from nature and from some of the inner experiences we were talking about at the beginning, and seeing these patterns. And then eventually meeting Nassim Haramein and Foster Gamble, who did Thrive, like about 20 years ago, and starting to find these allies who had gone very deep into the physics and into the research in all the ways that Foster has, confirming what I was experiencing. And that at that point is when I really shifted into a very active engagement in this field. And I also started working with Barbara Marx Hubbard and the Foundation for Conscious Evolution in 1999. I was co-director of her foundation for 5 years with her and with Teresa Collins, who was the other co-director, working with Barbara. And of course, Barbara just passed away a few months ago. And she really brought in the meme of conscious evolution into the world. And so, basically since around 99, I went from thinking a lot about all this stuff and this really big picture to participating in it and helping it to happen in the world. And throughout all these different means, Foundation for Conscious Evolution, Buckminster Fuller Institute, Thrive Movie, the Resonance Science Foundation, Cosmometry. And I'm a musician. I've been a lifelong musician, and that's actually my deepest and most joyful passion.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah, I bring that into. That's where I'm heading now in my life, more and more. Play music. So that's kind of in a nutshell my journey.
Well, I know another guy like that too, Kevin Estrella, that does the. Kevin Estrella has the website Pyramids on Mars, where music kind of shown. I mean, he says the music that he plays actually helps him go through portals consciously and awaken and stuff just with the guitar. Yeah. And then he made this song called the Whale Song, which he played it on a show that I produced one time. And it had that feeling of like home, like, kind of like Cloud Atlas. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but you hear a song or a tone or something that really gives you a very familiar feeling, and it seems type spiritual. And Robert Monroe in his book, Journeys Out of the Body, I think in his third book, I think it's Ultimate Journey, where he just keeps going out into consciousness, trying to figure out who he is and what he's made of. And he ends up a ball of light in a group of friends or family that are just other balls of light. And he talks about this song that he heard, or this harmony, that he knew he was home, and he would just go in a certain direction. And he was even describe it in the book, like up, down, left, right. Like he knew he had a job to do inside that harmony. And that was like the ultimate journey, right? It's really crazy. So cool.
Wow. Yeah. I'm familiar with those kinds of stories from different people, and even some of my own experiences where you transcend this very human, earthly, perceptual framework and go into those kind of realms where you're just balls of light, or, and you think, well, that seems so abstract and out of reality. And yet the people who have those experiences today, it's like the most familiar thing to me. It's like I felt home, really, more so than anywhere else. And so it kind of indicates there's a relationship between this bodily experience and the pure field of consciousness that we are. And, we're in this temporal physical experience that has this, what appears to be birth and death. And yet, does that mean that consciousness is tied in that cycle or ends, or does it continue? And I fully believe that it continues myself. And these kind of experiences just provide a larger kind of a context of understanding of that being so. And again, I think it's just very important to at least open our minds to that being a possibility, because it helps to inform just a greater understanding of who we are, and a little less getting caught up in the aspects of our world that are, like we were talking about earlier, that fighting and those dynamics and the politics and the things that we've made up that seem so important, when in fact in the larger context they're actually not that important. They're things we need to deal with and resolve, not to trivialize them. But in a larger context, we start to see we're bigger than that. And even we're much better than that when we're actually in our natural wholeness rather than in this divisive, fragmented kind of a mindset and, experience we create on the planet. And
sure.
So it's just really important to kind of hold that in our hearts and minds and come from that place.
Yeah, it's like certain things happen in our life, I think, that make us, we can't really prove that it's true, but we know there's some type of deeper truth to it, and we get pulled towards it. We question ourselves, like, am I just making this up in my head or whatever? But every time you do that, you run into synchronicities. I think you got to start listening to those synchronicities, and then sacred geometry and cosmometry, like you're showing, to me is another thing where it's almost like it's not really nature talking to us or giving us synchronicity. It's just flat out showing us that it's in everything. It's not a synchronicity. It's not anything that you can question yourself about. All you got to do is put pen to paper, put the math to it, and see that it's there and everything.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, to me, it's like the filler between that spot between, am I just putting this together in my mind or is this real in my heart? Well, if you go to sacred geometry, that kind of fills the gap. Things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's what's just so become increasingly popular. There's this is a visual language that speaks to us beyond our linear verbal language. Like you saw that image in the next octave and you're like, whoa, there's something there. It's saying something to me. And that's why I think sacred geometry has become so popular and why there's an importance to understanding what I call cosmometry, because it informs a greater truth of the nature of reality and who we are, and the fact that there are actually reliable, consistent patterns. It's not one big random mess, happening by chance. It's actually fundamentally organized. And when we see that, it actually gives us confidence to be able to utilize it, and even helps us relax in knowing that, wow, there's actually something that's holding us in a field of integrity. And we're not just like on the edge of chaotic destruction in every moment, Sure. We're not, and that helps us to really align and relax in a way that, this visual language, I think, is really helpful.
Speaking of that integrity, you've got Bruce Lipton, author of The Biology of Belief, who says, the knowledge provided in your book, Cosmometry, can empower our civilization to thrive into the future. Nassim Haramein has talked highly of your book. Just a lot of people that have Alex Gray, gotta love his work, right? Fantastic stuff.
It's fantastic.
These people who read your book, they're endorsing it. So everybody should really get this book, I believe. Cosmometry, Exploring the Holofractal Nature of the Cosmos by
it's on Amazon,
Marshal Lefferts.
On Amazon, print on demand, and just go to cosmometry.com and you can link right to it.
Is there any thing else? Like, do you have any social media pages, YouTubes, or anything like that you want to plug? By all means, man, you went the distance. Plug away.
Great, I appreciate it. Well, there's a Facebook page, Cosmometry, that I'm posting stuff into. Instagram, it's actually Cosmometry 1 because somebody else has Cosmometry, and so I have Cosmometry with the number 1 there. Can connect to that. Mainly those, and I have kind of budding video channels right now, but they're not really active quite yet.
Yeah,
but that's
I totally understand. Trust me. Social media is like not my thing at all either, but I try to do it as much as possible.
Takes a lot of work,
Yeah, it does. But thank you for coming on and talking to us about this. I can't wait to read your book, and hopefully we can have you back on once I've really read this thing thoroughly. I'm sure I'll have some more epiphanies I'd like to talk to you about later in the future.
Yeah, fantastic. That'd be great. Well, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate your like you said, your analytical mind and your diligent questions and your considerations about what's important here. So thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure, for sure. And we got to get out of here, guys. The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable's coming up next. Don't forget the show is produced by us, The Fringe FM. Don't copy it without written permission. Music was by Bundy and Chronox. Chronox is the official music. Bundy's the guitar man. Special thanks to Patrick Pacho, Patrick, Don, Dennis, Lady Ann, Eric Markham, Jeremy Scott, and all of you lovely folks in chat. Big shout out to the new people in chat. Also, my local brother here with Blake. See you guys tomorrow night. Good night.
The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.